In the first half of the 18th century, the highways of England were a treacherous place to travel. Highwaymen caused fear and preyed upon travellers, but one would be romanticised, becoming a legend that would spawn films, novels and television programmes. This is the story of Dick Turpin. Richard Turpin was born at the Blue Bell Inn in Hampstead, Essex. The exact date of his birth is unknown, though he was baptised on the 21st of September 1705. Richard was the fifth of 6 children to John Turpin and Mary Parmenter, his father being a butcher and innkeeper. It is unknown what education Richard received, but several stories suggest that he may have followed his father into these trades. In about 1725, Turpin married Elizabeth Millington, though no record survives of this date of the union, and like much of Turpin's life, it comes from testimony from his trial in 1739. Turpin then moved to Buckhurst Hill, where he opened a butcher's shop. By the early 1730s, he most likely became involved with the Essex gang of deer thieves known as the Gregorys. By 1733, the changing fortunes of the gang prompted Turpin to leave the butchery trade, and he became the landlord of the Rose and Crown Inn at Clay Hill, where he became a close associate of the Gregorys. By October 1734, several of the gang members had been captured or fled from justice. The remaining members then turned away from poaching and instead began raiding homes. The gang raided the home of Peter Splint and 2 days later the home of a gentleman named Richard Woolridge. These raids continued, growing in their daring and stealing hundreds of pounds. One such brutal raid was on a 70-year-old farmer, Joseph Lawrence. Lawrence had his breeches pulled around his ankles and was dragged around his house. Refusing to reveal the whereabouts of his money, Lawrence was beaten and a kettle of water poured over his head, before being made to sit bare-buttocked on a fire. But for all their cruelty, the gang made off with less than £30. Eventually, 3 gang members were apprehended on the 11th of February. John Wheeler, who may have been only 15, confessed and quickly betrayed his colleagues. Members of the Gregory gang were arrested and hung for their crimes, but Turpin escaped and turned to the crime he is most noted for: highway robbery. Turpin was first identified in a highway robbery on the 10th of July 1735, alongside Thomas Rowden. Several days later, the two struck again at Epping Forest, depriving a man of his personal belongings. The pair now had a bounty of £100 on their heads, but they continued their activities. In August, they robbed 5 people accompanying a coach, and shortly after attacked another coach party. In late December, Turpin parted company with Thomas, and little is known of Turpin's movements during 1736. Between March and April 1737, Turpin reappears and is working alongside 2 other highwaymen, Matthew King and Stephen Potter. The trio were responsible for a string of robberies, which ended suddenly in an incident at Whitechapel, after King, or possibly Turpin, had stolen a horse. The horse was identified by the landlord of the Green Man public house at Leytonstone, where he waited with the authorities for the supposed owners to collect the horse. Matthew King's brother, John, arrived late in the night and was quickly apprehended by the party. John told them of his brother's whereabouts. During the resulting melee, Matthew King was wounded by gunfire and died on the 19th of May. Turpin escaped to a hideaway in Epping Forest, where he was seen by one of the forest keepers, Thomas Morris. Morris, armed with pistols, attempted to capture him, and Turpin shot and killed Morris on the 4th of May. A £200 reward was offered for Turpin's capture, but he fled north under the alias of John Palmer. He posed as a horse trader and often hunted alongside local gentlemen. On 2nd of October 1738, Turpin shot another man's gamecock in the street. While being rebuked by John Robinson, he then threatened to shoot him also. Turpin refused to pay any compensation and was committed to a house of correction at Beverley. It was while at the house of correction that it was discovered that the horses sold by Turpin were stolen, a crime too serious for him to remain at the house, and Dick Turpin was then transferred to York Castle. From his cell, Turpin wrote a letter to his brother-in-law in Hampstead. Turpin's brother-in-law refused to pay the delivery charge, and the letter was moved to the post office at Saffron Walden, where it fell into the hands of James Smith. James Smith was an old schoolmate of Turpin and had taught him how to write. Recognising the handwriting, Smith alerted the authorities and travelled to York, where he identified John Palmer as Dick Turpin. Turpin was tried on the 22nd of March 1739 and was found guilty of horse theft. Turpin offered little in defence of himself and was sentenced to hang. Before his execution, Turpin frequently received visitors, with his jailer earning £100 from selling drinks to his guests. On the 7th of April 1739, Turpin was led through York by open cart to Knavesmere, where he was hung until dead. Turpin's body was then taken to St George's Church, Fishergate, but was soon dug up by body snatchers. His body was soon recovered by an angry mob, whom reburied Turpin's body where it lies to this day. Today, we think of Dick Turpin as a champion of the people, a knight who rode his steed, Black Bess, upon the highways for a worthy cause, an almost Robin Hood figure. But the truth is that his image was invented by the Victorians and later Hollywood movies. The real Dick Turpin was simply a violent criminal whose name has echoed through history.